I'm Ava, and I'm 33 years old. My phone is vibrating in my coat pocket, but I just let it buzz as my mother's voice rings in my ears. You have absolutely nothing to be thankful for this year, so just stay away and don't bring your shame on this family. She'd said it so casually, like she was talking about the weather, all while standing there in her spotless kitchen, not even bothering to look at me as she trimmed the stems of some flowers. It was the same kitchen where I'd stood beside her, helping to cook more holiday meals than I could count, meals I was now officially forbidden from attending. I kept my face a perfect blank mask, grabbed my keys from the counter, and just walked out without saying a single word. What could I have possibly said? But here's the one thing my dear mother has no idea about. 2 weeks ago, I won $120 million in the state lottery, and I've been guarding that secret, planning to reveal it during Thanksgiving dinner as my ultimate gift to them all. Where are you tuning in from today? Let me know your city in the comments, and please hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt like the black sheep of your own family. You are definitely going to want to see what I did next. Let me start from the beginning so you can understand how I ended up here. This all kicked off about 6 months ago when I was let go from my job at a major marketing agency. They called it corporate restructuring, which was just a fancy term for needing a fall guy. The reality was they needed someone to blame for the massive failure of the Horizon account, a disaster that wasn't even my fault. My boss, Mark, had been stealing credit for my successful campaigns for months, so when one finally went bad, guess who was pushed right under the bus? The reaction from my family was, as you might expect, supportive. My mother immediately suggested I move back in with them. Just until you're back on your feet, sweetie. Although I really think this might be a sign from the universe to reconsider your career path. My sister, Olivia, who has a cushy job at our dad's construction firm, helpfully chimed in that I could always answer the phones at their front desk. It's not beneath you, Ava. We all have to start somewhere. My brother, Leo's contribution was somehow even more helpful. Maybe this is the world's way of telling you to finally settle down and find a husband instead of chasing these unrealistic career ambitions. The world, it turned out, had other ideas for me. I managed to land a position at a smaller, boutique firm within just 3 weeks, for only a tiny bit less than what I was making before. But by that point, the narrative was set. I had become the family's official cautionary tale, the one who just couldn't seem to get her life together. Family dinners turned into these torturous exercises in self-control as they bombarded me with unsolicited advice on networking, interview techniques, and the critical importance of having realistic expectations. My cousin Chloe, who married a wealthy man at 22 and hadn't worked a single day in her life, was especially keen on suggesting I go into teaching, such a noble profession, and the schedule would give you plenty of time to work on your personal life. The lottery tickets became my one small, secret act of rebellion. Every single Friday, I'd make a stop at Miller's General Store and buy $10 worth of tickets. It was my own tiny, silent protest against their perfectly practical, predictable world. And of course, they mocked me for it relentlessly. Dad would launch into lectures on probability theory, while Mom would let out these dramatic sighs about my gambling problem. But that one Friday in early November, everything changed. I was sitting in my cramped apartment with Chinese takeout boxes littering my coffee table, checking my numbers against the winning combination on the TV. The first number matched. Okay. Then the second. By the time the fifth number matched, my hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the little slip of paper. $120 million. I think I just stared at that ticket for a solid hour, checking the numbers over and over again. Then I did what any sane person would do. I called in sick to work the next day, drove straight to the state lottery headquarters, and officially claimed my prize. After the government took its massive share, I was looking at roughly $75 million sitting in my bank account. The first few days felt like a dream. I went back to work, sat in my little cubicle, and pretended that my world hadn't just been turned completely upside down, all while my bank balance had more zeros than I could properly process. I ate the same sad desk lunch, I drove the same route home, and I watched reruns on my secondhand television. But slowly, a plan started to take shape in my mind. I would stun my family at Thanksgiving. I would announce the win and tell them I was sharing my fortune with all of them. Maybe then my mother would finally see that I wasn't the failure she'd made me out to be. Maybe my siblings would finally look at me with some respect instead of pity. I started making detailed lists. Pay off Olivia's mortgage, start college funds for Leo's kids, help mom and dad retire without a single financial worry, buy that big lake house we'd always dreamed about but could never afford. For weeks, I walked around with this massive secret burning a hole in my chest, just imagining the looks on their faces when I finally told them the truth, the shock, the pure joy, the dawning realization that the family disappointment had just become their savior. The irony was almost too much. For months, they'd been nagging me to get my life together, and now I had enough money to fix all of their lives too. But fate, as I was just about to find out, has a very twisted sense of humor. Last Tuesday, I decided I'd test the waters. I dropped by my mom's house without calling first, something I'd been doing less and less since I lost my job. I found her in the garden wearing those ridiculous flamingo print gloves she loves. "Ava, what are you doing here? I assumed you'd be out looking for a better job." I forced a smile, choosing to ignore the jab. "Actually, work is going great. We just landed a massive new client last week." She barely glanced up from her rose bushes. "That's nice, dear. Did you need something?" This was my moment. I was just thinking about Thanksgiving. I thought maybe I could help out more this year. Contribute financially to the dinner. That finally got her attention. She stood up straight, eyeing me with that look she usually reserves for sniffing spoiled milk. "Contribute how, exactly?" "Ava, darling, you just started this new job. You should be saving every single penny. I've been doing a lot better than you think, Mom. I could cover the whole dinner if you wanted. We could make it really special this year." The skepticism on her face was almost funny. She actually chuckled. "Oh, sweetie, a turkey from the grocery store and a few side dishes would probably stretch your budget to its limit. Let's leave the planning to the adults." The adults. I was a 33-year-old woman and she was talking to me like I was 12, offering to pay for dinner with my allowance. But I kept pushing. "What if I told you I could afford more than you think? What if I said I wanted to take the whole family out somewhere special for Thanksgiving? Ava." Her voice took on that patronizing edge. "You are still recovering from that job loss. You're living in that tiny apartment. And you're driving a car that's older than most people's children." She pulled off her gardening gloves with this dramatic flair. "The absolute last thing this family needs is for you to go into debt trying to prove a point that doesn't need proving. We love you just as you are, as I am, the perpetual screw-up. The one they had to love because of family obligation, not because I actually brought anything of value to the table." I left without another word, but the seed of doubt was planted. Maybe this grand surprise at Thanksgiving wasn't the beautiful gift I imagined. Maybe it was the only way they would ever see me as anything other than a burden. The following weekend, I went to my nephew's soccer game. Leo and his wife, Stephanie, were there, along with Olivia and her husband, Josh. It was just a normal family outing, except nothing about my life felt normal anymore. I sat there in my flimsy folding chair, surrounded by people who only knew me as struggling Ava, while my bank account held enough money to buy the entire sports complex. Aunt Ava! My nephew Noah came running over after the game, his uniform covered in grass stains, his face beaming with pure joy. "Did you see my goal? I saw it. You were amazing." I ruffled his hair, and for a split second, everything felt simple and right again. "Mom said you might not come to Thanksgiving this year because you're too busy with your new job." He looked genuinely worried. but you have to come. It's a tradition." I shot a look over at Olivia, who was suddenly very focused on something on her phone, pointedly not looking at me. Interesting. So they were already managing expectations, prepping everyone for my absence. The family disappointment couldn't even be counted on to show up for a holiday anymore. "I'll be there, buddy, I promise." But as the words left my mouth, I could feel the suffocating web of their low expectations wrapping around me. They would rather I didn't come at all than risk me somehow embarrassing them or failing to live up to whatever standard they had. That night, sitting in my tiny apartment, thanks, Mom, I tried to picture how different that soccer game would have been if they knew the truth. Would Noah still have run over to me with that same uncomplicated love? Would Olivia still have avoided my gaze? Would Leo still be making cracks about my ancient Toyota? This money was supposed to mean freedom, but it was starting to feel more like a test, a way to measure the exact depth of how little my own family thought of me when they believed I had nothing to offer. I picked up my phone and scrolled to my contacts. Maya, my college roommate, and the only soul on earth who knew about my lottery win, had warned me to be careful. "Money changes everything, Ava," she'd said. "Don't expect it to magically fix broken relationships." I had been so sure I could prove her wrong. I thought I could be the one to heal my family, to prove something. But the real question was I trying to prove it to them or to myself? The next morning, I did something I had never done before. I drove to a luxury car dealership and paid cash for a brand new Audi Q8. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted to see what would happen. I wanted to see if anyone in my family would notice, if they would wonder how their struggling daughter suddenly had a car that cost more than most people's annual salary. I parked it in my usual spot at work and just waited. It took exactly 3 days for Olivia to call. "Mom saw your new car in the parking lot at the grocery store. She's worried you've done something financially reckless." "Like what?" I kept my voice perfectly calm. "Like getting into massive debt just to keep up appearances. Ava, we all know you're embarrassed about the job situation, but going into debt for a fancy car is not the answer." And there it was, even when they were presented with physical evidence that maybe, just maybe, I was doing better than they assumed. Their immediate conclusion was that I was making a foolish, irresponsible choice. The idea that I might actually be successful on my own was so completely foreign to them that financial irresponsibility seemed like the only logical explanation. "What if I told you I paid cash for it?" Olivia laughed, an actual condescending laugh. "Ava, come on, we're family. You don't have to lie to us to try and impress us." After she hung up, I just sat there in my beautiful, fully paid-for car, and a harsh reality hit me. The money wasn't going to change how they saw me. It was going to challenge their entire perception of me. And people do not like having their fundamental beliefs challenged, especially when those beliefs are about someone they're supposed to love. The final confrontation happened exactly 1 week before Thanksgiving. I decided to give it one last shot, to give my mother one more chance to see me as something different before I played my winning hand. I showed up at her house with a bottle of expensive wine and a bouquet of fresh flowers from the upscale florist downtown, small signals that maybe their struggling daughter was doing better than they thought. She accepted both gifts with polite thanks, but showed absolutely no curiosity about how I could afford them. We were sitting in her living room when she casually dropped the bomb that they might need to simplify Thanksgiving this year. "Money's been tight with your father's hours being cut, and Olivia's mortgage payment just went up. We're thinking maybe just the immediate family, something low-key." This was my opening. "Mom, what if I told you that money wasn't an issue at all? What if I said I wanted to host Thanksgiving this year at a really nice restaurant? My treat." She set down her coffee cup with the careful precision of someone trying not to say something deeply insulting. "Sweetheart, that's a lovely thought, but we both know you can't afford that. There is no shame in your situation. But let's not pretend it's something that it's not. But what if I can afford it? What if things have changed for me recently?" Her expression shifted from patronizing to genuinely concerned. "Ava, Please tell me you haven't done something foolish. If you're in some kind of trouble..." "I'm not in trouble, Mom. I'm trying to tell you that I'm doing well. Really well." She studied me with the intensity of someone trying to diagnose a mental breakdown. "Honey, I drive past your apartment building twice a week. I know what those places cost. Your car might be new, but anyone can get a lease these days. What is really going on here?" The frustration finally boiled over. Why is it so impossible for you to believe that I might actually be successful? Why is your first assumption always that I'm either lying in trouble or making terrible choices? Because I am your mother, and I know your situation. I know what you make at that little firm. I know what your rent costs. And I know you have never been particularly good with money. This sudden claim of wealth is concerning. Concerning. My potential success was concerning to her. What would it take for you to believe me? She let out a long sigh, and in that one sound was every single conversation we'd ever had about my limitations. Every subtle and not so subtle look of disappointment. Every comparison to my more successful siblings. "Ava, I think this conversation is getting away from us. Why don't we just talk about something else?" But I couldn't let it go. "Answer the question, Mom. What would it take?" She was quiet for a long, heavy moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice was gentle but utterly devastating. "Honestly, I think you're struggling more than you're willing to admit, and you're creating fantasies to cope. It's not at all unusual for people in your situation, my situation, the eternal underachiever situation, the disappointment situation, the burden situation, my situation. You lost your job. You're barely making ends meet. You're single at 33 with no real prospects. It's a lot of stress. And sometimes people create these elaborate stories to make themselves feel better." I stood up slowly, grabbing my purse. "I see. Don't be so dramatic, Ava. I'm just trying to help you face reality." "Oh, I'm facing reality, Mom, more clearly than I have in years." I was already at the door when she delivered the final fatal blow. "Before you go, there's something else we need to discuss about Thanksgiving." I turned back, hoping against all hope that this was where she would soften, where she'd invite me to prove her wrong about everything. "I've been talking with Olivia and Leo, and we all think it might be best if you don't join us. Maybe it's better if you stay away so you don't bring your shame on this family." There it was. The complete and total rejection, all wrapped up in a package of concern and delivered with a polite smile. I didn't argue. I didn't try to defend myself. I didn't reveal the truth about the lottery ticket that could have changed every single one of their lives. I just nodded and walked out, because in that moment I realized something incredibly important. They didn't want me to succeed. They needed me to be the family failure. It gave them someone to look down on, someone to feel superior to, someone to pity and manage. My success would shatter the entire family dynamic they had so carefully constructed around my supposed inadequacy. As I sat there in my expensive car in her driveway, something crystallized in my mind. The money was never going to fix this relationship, but it could certainly end it on my own terms. And maybe, just maybe, it was time they learned that the daughter they'd so casually dismissed wasn't nearly as powerless as they believed. Have you ever felt like your own family needed you to fail? How do you deal with people who can't accept that you might be more than they think you are? Let me know in the comments below. That night, I called Maya. She picked up on the second ring, probably hearing the tremor in my voice because her first word was a cautious, "What happened?" I told her everything. The uninvitation to Thanksgiving. My mother's armchair diagnosis of my mental state. The absolute dismissal of any possibility that I could have succeeded on my own. "I'm not surprised," Maya said after I finished. "I've been watching your family treat you like their designated failure for years. But they don't know about the money yet. This is how they see you when they think you have nothing." Exactly. Which tells you everything you need to know about their love. Maya had always been direct, sometimes brutally so, but she was also the only person who had never once treated me like I was less capable than anyone else. "I've been thinking," I continued, the words forming as I spoke them. "Maybe I shouldn't tell them about the lottery at all." "Now you're talking," she said. "What if I just vanished, started over somewhere new with a clean slate?" There was a long pause on the line. Then, "Are you asking for my permission or are you talking yourself out of it?" It was a good question. I was raised to believe that family was everything, that blood ties came with obligations that went beyond respect or decent treatment. The idea of severing those ties completely was both terrifying and incredibly liberating. I just keep thinking about Noah. And what about when Mom gets older? What kind of person just abandons their family? "The kind of person whose family abandoned them first," Maya said quietly. "Ava, they disinvited you from Thanksgiving because they were embarrassed by your very existence. That's not love. That's not family. That's cruelty with a biological excuse." She was right. But knowing something in your head and accepting it in your heart are two very different things. The next few days were a strange blur. I went to work, came home to my apartment, and sat surrounded by furniture that suddenly seemed impossibly shabby next to the number in my bank account. I could afford anything I wanted: a penthouse apartment, a mansion in the hills, a condo in Paris. But I stayed in my small space, living the life of someone who made $50,000 a year instead of someone worth $75 million. It felt like I was living a lie, but I wasn't sure which version of me was more authentic: poor Ava or rich Ava. On Saturday, I drove past the house where my family would be gathering for Thanksgiving. Olivia's car was already in the driveway, along with Leo's SUV and the cars of various aunts, uncles, and cousins. The full family gathering that I had been exiled from for my own good. I parked across the street and just watched through their big front window as they moved around inside. Mom setting the table with her good china, Dad carving something in the kitchen, Olivia arranging a centerpiece, a perfect picture of domestic bliss untarnished by the presence of their struggling, shameful relative. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my cousin Chloe. "Missing you at Thanksgiving prep. Hope you're doing okay." The performative concern was almost worse than open hostility. She knew I'd been uninvited. They all knew, but they would all maintain the fiction that this was somehow my choice, my inability to handle being around family. I was about to drive off when Leo came outside to grab something from his car. He spotted me immediately, and for a second, we just stared at each other through our windshields. He walked over, and I rolled down my window. "Ava, what are you doing here?" "Just driving by," the lie came easily, "heading to the store." He looked incredibly uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Listen, about Thanksgiving, don't worry about it. I get it. It's not personal. Mom's just worried about you, and she thought a quiet holiday at home might be better." "For who, Leo?" "Better for who?" He didn't answer because we both knew the real answer. It would be better for them, more comfortable, less complicated. "I hope you all have a wonderful time," I said, and I actually meant it. As I drove away, I made a decision. I was going to attend a different kind of Thanksgiving dinner, one where my presence was actually wanted, where I wasn't a problem to be managed or a burden to be endured. I was going to take myself to the most expensive restaurant in the city, order whatever I wanted, and toast to my new freedom from people who claimed to love me but couldn't stand the sight of me. It wasn't the Thanksgiving I had planned, but it was the one I deserved. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop pretending that biology created obligations that superseded basic human dignity. The money in my account wasn't just financial freedom. It was the power to choose who deserved to be in my life. My family had made their choice about whether I belonged at their table. Now it was time for me to make mine. Thanksgiving Day was gray and drizzly, which felt fittingly dramatic for my first major holiday as an exile from my own family. I'd secured a reservation at the Gilded Spoon, the kind of restaurant where a single meal cost more than my family spent on groceries in a month. I dressed carefully in a new black dress I'd bought for the occasion. It was simple, but expensive enough that I felt like a different person wearing it, like someone who belonged in places my family couldn't even imagine. The Gilded Spoon was surprisingly full for Thanksgiving, filled with other people who had opted out of traditional family gatherings, solo diners, couples, small groups of friends. My kind of people, it seemed. The waiter showed me to a table by a large window overlooking the city lights. "Will anyone else be joining you today?" "No, just me. And I'd like to start with your finest champagne." As I sat there sipping champagne that cost more than my old monthly grocery budget, I couldn't help but think about what my family was doing at that exact moment. Probably sitting around Mom's dining table, making small talk about their jobs and the weather, carefully avoiding any mention of my absence. Or maybe they were talking about me, expressing their concern about my mental state, my financial delusions, my inability to function, the wayward daughter who couldn't even handle a family holiday anymore. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Olivia. "Hope you're having a good day. Love you." The casual cruelty of it almost made me laugh. Love you, but not enough to include you. Love you, but not enough to believe in you. Love you, but not enough to treat you with basic respect. I flipped my phone face down on the table and focused on the menu. A 7-course tasting menu that would cost more than most people's car payments. I ordered it along with the wine pairings because I could. Because for the first time in my adult life, money was no object. The irony was rich. They had excluded me for being too poor to fit their image of family success. And here I was, sitting in a level of luxury they couldn't afford, paid for with money they would never believe I actually had. Halfway through my meal, another text came through, this time from Leo. "Mom's worried about you spending Thanksgiving alone. Maybe we could grab coffee next week." Now they were worried. Now that it was too late to include me, but not too late to soothe their own guilt about excluding me. I typed back a simple reply. "Thanks, but I'm not alone. Having a wonderful time." Which, in a way, was true. I was having a wonderful time being treated like a valued customer instead of a problem to be managed. The waitstaff was attentive without being condescending. The sommelier explained the wines without talking down to me, and no one questioned whether I could afford what I was ordering. It was refreshing to just exist in a space where my worth wasn't constantly being questioned and diminished. As I was finishing dessert, a chocolate lava cake that probably cost more than my mother's entire Thanksgiving meal, my phone rang. It was Maya. "So, how's your fancy solo Thanksgiving going?" "Better than I expected. The food is incredible, and not a single person has told me I'm delusional or concerning." "Good for you. So, are you ready for Phase 2? Phase 2. We had talked about this. The plan to gradually reveal my new circumstances, not with a dramatic announcement, but through a series of subtle shifts that would force my family to confront their own assumptions about me. I think so. I bought a house this morning. Maya nearly choked on whatever she was drinking. "You what?" "Online auction. All cash offer. It's a 4-bedroom colonial in Aspen Ridge. I figured it was time I stopped living like I make what they think I make. Ava, that's..." She paused, probably doing a quick mental calculation of real estate prices in that exclusive neighborhood. That's a $2 million house. 2.3, actually. But it has everything I want. A pool, a 3-car garage, and most importantly, it's in a neighborhood where I will never accidentally run into any of my relatives. The decision had been impulsive, made somewhere between the soup and the fish course when I realized I was just done living down to their expectations. If they were going to treat me like a failure no matter what, I might as well enjoy my success without their judgment. "When do you move in?" "Next week. I'm hiring professional movers and a decorator. I'm going to do the whole thing." After dinner, I drove through my old neighborhood one last time. I passed the house where my family was probably finishing up their perfect, uncomplicated holiday dinner. I passed the apartment building where I had lived like someone who was constantly apologizing for taking up space. Tomorrow, I would start living like someone who belonged in the world, someone whose success wasn't a delusion or a source of concern, but simply a fact, someone whose worth wasn't determined by other people's ability to see it. The rain had stopped, and the city lights reflected off the wet streets like scattered jewels. Everything looked different from behind the wheel of my expensive car, on my way back from my expensive dinner, carrying the knowledge of my expensive new house. I didn't just feel richer. I felt more real, more myself. For the first time in a very long time. I was thankful, just not for any of the things my family would have expected. The week after Thanksgiving was blissfully quiet. I took time off from work, telling my boss I was dealing with a family situation, which was true in its own way. I was busy orchestrating the purchase of the house and arranging for the move. Moving day was a surreal experience. Professional movers carefully packed my few modest belongings while I supervised from the marble-floored foyer of my new home. The contrast was stark. My secondhand furniture looked completely lost in rooms that were designed for something much grander. That afternoon, I went on a shopping spree. Not the careful, budget-conscious shopping I'd done my whole life, but the kind of shopping I had only ever seen in movies. I bought furniture that cost more than most cars, art that required its own special insurance policy, and a home theater system that made my old TV look like a relic from a museum. The interior decorator I'd hired, a woman named Maria who worked exclusively with the city's wealthiest residents, walked through the empty house with me, taking notes on my tastes. She treated me exactly as I was, someone with sophisticated preferences and an unlimited budget. "The bones of this house are magnificent," she said, running a hand along the intricate crown molding. "With your budget, we can create something truly spectacular." My budget. She said it as a fact, not as a hopeful guess about my financial capacity. It was so refreshing to finally be seen accurately. That evening, I sat on the floor of my new living room, surrounded by nothing but the promise of expensive furniture that wouldn't arrive for another week, and I finally let myself process what I had done. I had bought a house. Not just any house, but the kind of house that screamed its owner's success to anyone who drove by. My family would find out eventually. Someone would mention seeing me at the local country club, or they'd notice the new address on a holiday card, and their reaction would be predictable. Confusion, suspicion, and then some convoluted explanation that allowed them to keep their narrative about me intact. Maybe I'd inherited money from a long-lost relative. Maybe I'd secretly married a rich man. Maybe I was just renting the house and pretending to own it. Any of those explanations would be more plausible to them than the simple truth that I had become successful all on my own, and they had been too invested in my failure to ever notice. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. "Olivia drove by your apartment today. The manager said you moved out. Where are you living now?" I stared at the message for a long minute. This was it, the first test. I could ease them into the new reality, or I could let them keep wondering while I built my new life without them. I typed back, "Found a better place. Don't worry about me." Her reply was instant. "Ava, I'm your mother. Of course I worry. What's the address? I'd like to see where you're living." The address. If I gave it to her, she'd be driving by within the hour. She would see the house, the exclusive neighborhood, the 3-car garage with my Audi parked inside. She would be forced to confront the fact that her concerning daughter was living better than any of them. A part of me craved that confrontation. I wanted to see the look on her face when she realized how completely she had misjudged my entire life. But another part of me, the part that had learned to protect itself over years of subtle put-downs, wasn't ready for that conversation. I turned my phone off without replying. The silence felt powerful. For 33 years, I had been available for their judgments, their advice, their constant management of my life. I had accepted their assessments of my abilities and their decisions about my place in the family hierarchy. But money, I was quickly discovering, didn't just buy things, it bought choices. The choice to engage or not, the choice to prove myself or not, the choice to accept their version of who I was, or to finally create my own. The next morning, I woke up in my new master bedroom with sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked a garden I actually owned. I made coffee in a kitchen that was bigger than my entire last apartment and sat at a granite island that had cost more than many people's annual salaries. It all felt surreal, but also strangely inevitable. This was who I had always been on the inside, someone who deserved beautiful things and respectful treatment. The money hadn't changed me. It had just allowed me to finally live authentically. When I turned my phone back on, it showed 7 missed calls from various family members and a string of increasingly frantic texts. Olivia wondering why I wasn't answering, Leo asking if I was okay, Mom demanding to know where I was. The concern that had been so conveniently absent when they uninvited me from Thanksgiving was suddenly overwhelming now that I had made myself unavailable to them. I scrolled through the messages without answering a single one. Let them worry. Let them wonder. Let them experience for once what it felt like to be on the outside looking in. As I sat there in my gorgeous new kitchen, sipping expensive coffee and reading concerned texts from people who had shown me no concern when it mattered, I realized something important. I no longer needed their approval or their inclusion. I had something better. I had my own life, lived on my own terms, funded by my own success, and for the first time in years, that felt like more than enough. The revelation that would shatter their world was still coming, but it would come when I chose it, on my terms, in my own time. Not as a desperate plea to prove my worth, but as a simple, undeniable statement of fact. They had been wrong about me all along. The question wasn't whether they deserved to know the truth. The question was whether I even wanted to give them the chance to be wrong about me again. 3 weeks passed in blissful radio silence. I'd settled into a new routine, morning coffee on my sun-drenched terrace, work at the firm where no one knew about my windfall, evenings spent in rooms that finally felt like they belonged to the person I was inside. My colleagues noticed the changes, of course, the new clothes that fit perfectly, a newfound confidence in my voice during presentations, a willingness to challenge ideas in meetings. They just chalked it up to professional growth, not personal wealth. You seem different lately, Ava, my boss, Jennifer, mentioned during our weekly check-in. More assured. If only she knew I could buy her entire company with what I had left over after decorating expenses. But the family silence couldn't hold. On a Tuesday evening, as I was arranging fresh flowers in my vast dining room, the doorbell chimed. I glanced at the security camera display and saw Olivia standing on my front porch, looking nervous and completely out of place. She had found me. I considered not answering, just letting her stand there and wonder. The same way I had stood outside their Thanksgiving gathering, excluded and unwanted, but my curiosity got the better of me. I had to see how she would try to explain this. I opened the door, leaning casually against the heavy oak frame. Olivia, how did you find me? I hired someone. She was staring past me into the grand foyer, her eyes wide as she took in the marble floors and the glittering crystal chandelier. Ava, what is this place? It's my home. Would you like to come in? She followed me inside, her mouth hanging slightly open as we walked through rooms that looked like they were straight out of an architecture magazine. The living room with its custom furniture and original oil paintings, the kitchen with its professional-grade appliances and gleaming granite surfaces, the dining room where the flowers, which cost more than her weekly grocery bill, sat in a vase worth more than her car. Ava, she finally said, stopping in the middle of my living room and turning in a slow circle. How is any of this possible? I settled into my favorite armchair, Italian leather, custom-made, and gestured for her to sit on the sofa. She perched on the very edge, as if she were afraid to touch anything. What do you mean? This house, this furniture, that car in the driveway. Her voice was getting higher with each word. Where did all this come from? I could have told her the truth right then. I could have pulled out the photo of the lottery ticket I still kept in my phone and watched her face as her entire reality rearranged itself. But instead, I just smiled. I've been doing well. Doing well? She let out a laugh, but it sounded more like a sob. Ava, this isn't doing well. This is wealthy. This is millionaire wealthy, is it? My casual tone seemed to unnerve her more than a dramatic confession ever could. She was looking for explanations, for a story that would make sense of all this. Mom is going crazy, we all are. You just disappeared. You stopped answering your calls, and now we find out you're living like this. Like what, Olivia? Like someone who doesn't need you anymore. And there it was. The real fear. Not that I was struggling, but that I wasn't. Not that I needed their help, but that I very clearly didn't. Their entire family dynamic was built on me being the one who required their management, their guidance, their pity. I never needed you, I said gently. I wanted to be included. There's a big difference. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. That's not true. We're family. Of course you need us. Do I? Because when you thought I was struggling, you uninvited me from Thanksgiving. When you thought I was delusional about money, you laughed in my face. When you thought I was making bad choices, you decided I was too embarrassing to have around. We were trying to help you. Number, you were trying to manage a problem that you thought I was. And now that I'm not a problem, you have no idea how to relate to me. Olivia stood up abruptly, pacing over to the massive window that overlooked my new swimming pool. This doesn't make any sense, Ava. Your job, your salary. We know what you make, do you? She spun around. Yes. We looked it up. Marketing associates at firms like yours make $40,000 or $50,000 a year. Even with a promotion, you couldn't possibly afford. She gestured helplessly around the opulent room. Maybe you don't know as much about my situation as you thought you did. The doubt was finally starting to creep into her expression, the same flicker of uncertainty I'd seen on Leo's face at the soccer game, and on Mom's face when I'd tried to tell her I was doing well. Are you going to tell me what's going on, or are we going to keep playing these games? I weighed my options. This was the moment. I could maintain the mystery. Let them keep guessing and driving themselves mad trying to explain what they couldn't comprehend. Or I could end their confusion with one simple revelation that would change everything. But something held me back. Maybe it was the memory of Olivia's condescending laugh when I suggested I could pay cash for a car. Maybe it was the echo of my mother's voice telling me I had nothing to be thankful for. I won the lottery, I said finally. Olivia blinked. Once, twice. Then she started laughing. Oh, come on, Ava. Be serious. I am being serious. The lottery? Your little Friday night tickets? Those scratch-offs you waste your money on? The laughter was still there, but it was becoming more forced, more brittle. Ava, the biggest prize you've ever won was $20. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the photo I had taken of the winning ticket, and handed it to her without saying a word. The laughter died on her lips as she stared at the screen. The numbers, the date, the jackpot amount, $120 million. This isn't real. But her voice was barely a whisper. Check it yourself. November 2nd drawing. Those are the winning numbers. She was quiet for a very long time, staring at the phone as if willing it to change what it was showing her. Finally, she looked up at me, and her face held an expression I had never seen before. Fear. Not fear of me, but fear of what my success meant for the story they had all been telling themselves about who I was and who they were in relation to me. How long have you known? Since the day after the drawing, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. The timeline sank in. I could see it on her face. I had known about the money when Mom uninvited me. I had known when they were all laughing about my financial delusions. I had known when they decided I was too much of a failure to be included in their perfect family gathering. Ava? Olivia whispered, her voice trembling. We had no idea. No, I said, my voice steady and clear. You didn't, because you never bothered to find out. What do you think will happen when the rest of the family finds out about Ava's secret? Drop your predictions in the comments below. Olivia left 20 minutes later, clutching my new phone number and a promise that she wouldn't tell the rest of the family until I was ready. I could see the wheels turning in her head as she walked to her car, a 10-year-old sedan that suddenly looked ancient, parked in my circular driveway. I didn't believe for a second that she would keep my secret. Olivia had never kept a secret in her life, and this one was too big, too shocking, too fundamental to everything our family believed about itself. I was right. My phone started ringing at 7:30 the next morning. Ava Elizabeth, you answer this phone right now. Mom's voice was shrill, barely contained panic. The second call was from my dad, his approach different, more analytical, less emotional. Ava, your mother is very upset about this lottery story. I've been doing some research, and the odds of winning that particular jackpot were approximately 292 million to 1. I think we need to have a family meeting to get to the bottom of what's really going on here. A family meeting. To discuss my delusions, no doubt. To stage an intervention for the daughter who had lost touch with reality so completely she was living in fantasy mansions and claiming impossible windfalls. I didn't call any of them back. Instead, I went to work, where Jennifer complimented my new bracelet, an understated Cartier piece that had cost more than most people's cars, and asked if I'd consider taking the lead on a major new account. You've really come into your own lately, she said. There's a confidence about you that clients are responding to. Confidence. It was funny how having $75 million in the bank could affect one's professional demeanor. That afternoon, I made a decision. If my family wanted a meeting, they could have one, but it would be on my terms, in my space, with the full, undeniable truth they were so determined to deny. I sent a group text to all of them. Family meeting. Sunday at 2 p.m., my house. Address attached. Come prepared to apologize. The responses were immediate and predictable. Mom, Ava, we are coming to help you, not to apologize for being concerned about your well-being. Leo, what's this address? This isn't your apartment. Dad, I'll be there. We need to get to the bottom of this situation. Only Olivia's text, a simple, okay, suggested she might actually believe what she had seen. The others were clearly planning an intervention. Perfect. On Sunday morning, I prepared my house like a stage. On the polished surface of my dining room table, I arranged the actual lottery ticket, along with official bank statements, the deed to my house, and the purchase receipts for my car. Everything they would need to accept the reality they were so determined to reject. I dressed carefully in a simple but obviously expensive cashmere sweater and slacks. I wanted to look successful, not like someone in the midst of a manic episode. At exactly 2 o'clock, their cars began pulling into my driveway. I watched from my living room window as they climbed out, staring up at my house with expressions that ranged from confusion to concern to something that looked an awful lot like envy. Mom was the first to ring the bell. She walked into my foyer like she was entering a crime scene, her eyes darting around as if searching for evidence of whatever con she was convinced I was running. Ava, whose house is this, really? It's mine, Mom. Welcome. The others filed in behind her. Dad with his analytical expression, Leo looking deeply uncomfortable, and Olivia trying to appear supportive while clearly still grappling with her own shock. I led them into the living room where they perched uneasily on furniture that was worth more than their annual salaries combined. Well, Dad said, pulling out a small notebook, I think we should start with some basic questions about your financial situation. I simply gestured toward the dining room table. All your questions are answered right over there. They followed me to the table, where I had laid out the evidence like exhibits in a courtroom. Mom picked up the lottery ticket first, examining it with the intensity of someone looking for signs of forgery. This could be fake. Check the numbers online, I said calmly. Dad was already on his phone, comparing the numbers on the ticket to the official state lottery website. His expression shifted from skepticism to confusion to something approaching sheer shock. These are the actual winning numbers. Leo grabbed the bank statements, his eyes scanning the balance column. His face went pale. Ava, this shows $75 million after taxes. Yes. The silence that fell over the room was profound. They just stood there around my dining room table, a table that had cost more than any of their cars, staring at the undeniable proof that their most fundamental assumptions about me had been completely and utterly wrong. Mom was the first to speak, her voice barely a whisper. How long? How long have you known? Since November 3rd, the day after the drawing, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. The implications of that timeline hit them in waves. I could see it on their faces as they mentally replayed the conversations, the decisions, the dismissals that had all happened after I had become one of the wealthiest people in the city. Dad cleared his throat, his analytical mind struggling to process the new data. Ava, why didn't you tell us? I tried to. Remember, Mom? I tried to tell you I was doing well, that I could afford nice things, that I wanted to contribute to Thanksgiving. Your response was to question my mental health. Mom's face had gone ashen. We didn't know. No, you didn't. Because you never once considered the possibility that I might actually be successful. It was easier for you to believe I was delusional than to admit you might have been wrong about me all along. The truth just hung there in the air between us, changing everything, and yet, at the same time, changing nothing. Because now came the real test. What would they do with this truth? The silence stretched on, thick and uncomfortable. 4 people who had spent years managing my perceived limitations now faced the stark reality that I had no limitations to manage. Mom was the first to recover, her expression shifting from shock to something that looked disturbingly like calculation. Well, this changes things, doesn't it? Does it? Of course it does. Ava, you're family. We've always supported each other through thick and thin. The revisionist history was breathtaking. Supported each other? You know what I mean. We stick together. That's what families do. Leo cleared his throat. Ava, I know this is probably all very overwhelming, having this kind of windfall. We should talk about how to handle it responsibly. And there it was. They had pivoted from denying my success to trying to manage it in the span of 5 minutes. Handle it how, exactly? Well, you'll need financial advisors, investment strategies. Dad has some experience with portfolios. I looked at my father, whose entire retirement portfolio probably totaled less than I had spent on furniture last week. Is that right, Dad? I think Leo has a point. This kind of money requires very careful stewardship. There are tax implications, investment considerations. I'm sure there are. Olivia leaned forward eagerly. We could help you research the best financial planners in the city. Make sure you don't get taken advantage of by someone who doesn't have your best interests at heart. The irony was so thick I could have sliced it with a knife. They were worried about other people taking advantage of me. That's very thoughtful of you, I said evenly. Mom was warming to the theme, and you'll want to be very careful about who you tell. Word gets out about something like this, and suddenly everyone is your best friend, you know? People will come out of the woodwork asking for money. People will ask for money, I repeated. Oh, absolutely. You have to be firm about your boundaries. Family is different, of course. But strangers, acquaintances, even some friends, they will all have their hands out. How is family different? She looked at me, confused by the question. Well, we look out for each other. We share. That's what family means. I stood up and walked to my kitchen to pour myself a glass of water. They all watched me move through my space with new eyes, probably calculating what everything cost, what my daily life must look like now, and most importantly, what it all meant for them. Ava, Dad said when I returned. "We owe you an apology." Here it was, the moment I had once dreamed of. For what? For not believing in you, for not seeing your potential, for... He gestured helplessly around the room. "For treating you like you weren't capable of great things. I appreciate that. And we want to make it up to you," Leo added quickly. "However we can. And how would you make it up to me?" "Well, I mean, there are ways families can be closer, more involved in each other's lives." Olivia nodded enthusiastically. "We could have regular family dinners again. Maybe here, since you have such a beautiful dining room. And holidays," Mom chirped. "You could host the holidays now. Christmas here would be magical with all this space." They were completely rewriting our entire relationship in real time, casting themselves as the loving, supportive family who had always been there for me, just waiting for the right moment to show their true colors. "What about Olivia's mortgage?" I asked casually. Olivia's face lit up. "What about it? You mentioned it was causing stress for the family, making Thanksgiving hard to afford?" "Oh. Well, I mean, if you were thinking about helping with that, it would certainly be appreciated. But I wouldn't want to presume." "And Leo, how are things with the kids' college funds?" His expression brightened instantly. "Actually, Ava, since you bring it up, we've been so worried about how to afford tuition for both kids. If there were some way to ensure they could go to good schools without taking on crushing debt. And Mom, Dad, retirement planning must be stressful on your current income." Mom leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with possibility. "It has been a challenge, living on your father's reduced hours. But we've always made do. They were all leaning toward me now, like plants turning toward the sun. The family that had found me too embarrassing to include at their Thanksgiving table was suddenly very, very interested in inclusion. It sounds like everyone has some financial pressures that my windfall could help address." "We're not asking for anything," Dad said quickly. "But if you wanted to help your family, we would be grateful." "Of course you would." Something in my tone must have given me away, because their eager expressions became slightly more cautious. "Ava?" Mom's voice carried a note of uncertainty. "I'm just trying to understand something," I said, my voice calm and even. "When you all thought I had nothing, I was too much of a burden to include in family gatherings. Now that I have everything, suddenly family support and togetherness are top priorities." "It's not like that," Olivia protested weakly. "Isn't it? 3 weeks ago, you were concerned about my mental health because I claimed to be doing well financially. Today, you're making plans for how I should spend my money on all of you. We're not making plans." "You are absolutely making plans. College funds, mortgage payments, retirement support. You've gone from managing my poverty to managing my wealth in the span of a single afternoon." The silence returned, heavier this time. "Ava," Mom said carefully, "I understand you're hurt about Thanksgiving. I'm not hurt about Thanksgiving, Mom. I'm educated by it." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I learned something very valuable about who you all are when you think I have nothing to offer. And now, I'm learning something equally valuable about who you are when you think I have everything to give." Leo shifted uncomfortably. "We've always cared about you, Ava. The money doesn't change that." "You're right," I said. "The money doesn't change anything. It just reveals what was already there. And what it had revealed wasn't pretty, but we weren't done yet. The real test was still to come." They left that afternoon with promises to talk soon and suggestions for family planning sessions to discuss how to handle this blessing responsibly. The seamless transition from a concerned intervention to an eager financial planning committee had been dizzying. Over the next week, my phone became a constant source of dark amusement. The texts and calls arrived daily, each one more transparent than the last. From Mom. "Saw a great article about charitable giving strategies for high net worth individuals. Would love to discuss some worthy causes that are close to our family's heart." From Leo. Been thinking about what you said. Maybe we should look into setting up family trusts. For tax purposes, of course. From Olivia. Found the perfect financial planner. She specializes in sudden wealth and family dynamics. Should I set up a meeting for us? I let them spin their webs for a few days. Then I sent out another group text. Family meeting Sunday. Important announcement about my plans for the money. This time, they all responded within minutes, confirming their attendance with an eagerness that would have been flattering if it weren't so grotesquely transparent. On Sunday afternoon, they assembled in my living room again, but the dynamic was completely different. They were relaxed now, comfortable in my space, already acting like stakeholders in my good fortune. Mom had even brought a Tupperware of homemade cookies, a peace offering, perhaps, or a not-so-subtle reminder of family traditions and obligations. "So," Dad said, settling into my very expensive sofa as if he belonged there, "what did you want to discuss?" I stood before them, my heart calm. I've been doing a lot of thinking about the money, about what to do with it. "That's smart," Olivia said approvingly. "Taking your time to make good decisions, and I've realized something important. This money, it's not really mine." They all leaned forward, their attention suddenly razor sharp. I mean, I didn't earn it, it was just blind luck, random chance. And I keep thinking about all the people out there who could use this money so much more than I can. "People like who?" Leo asked, his voice cautious. "Charities, foundations, people who are actually struggling, not just someone who happened to buy a lucky ticket at Miller's General Store." The silence was profound. I watched their faces as they processed what I was suggesting. The idea of charitable giving was fine when it involved small, tax-deductible percentages. Giving away everything was apparently a very different conversation. "Ava," Mom said slowly, "that's very generous of you to think of others. But you have to be practical, too. Practical how? Well, you need to take care of yourself first. Make sure you're secure. And then there's family to consider." Family? We've all been struggling in our own ways. If you have the ability to help the people who love you most— "The people who love me most?" She nodded earnestly. "Your father and I have worked so hard our entire lives. We deserve to retire comfortably. Olivia and Leo have children to think about, their futures, their educations. And what about the children who don't have aunts who won the lottery? Of course, those children matter, too. But charity begins at home, sweetie." Leo jumped in. "Ava, think about it logically. You give this money to strangers and you'll never really know if it's helping anyone. But if you help us, you can see the direct impact. You'll know the money is going to good people who will use it responsibly." "Good people," I repeated. "People who love you," Olivia added quickly. "People who will always be grateful for what you've done for them. And if I give it all away to charity instead—" The temperature in the room seemed to drop by 10 degrees. "That would be—" Dad paused, searching for the right diplomatic phrase. "Financially irresponsible. You'd be leaving yourself vulnerable. And your family, too." "My family would be vulnerable?" "Ava, honey." Mom's voice took on that patient tone she used when explaining things to slow children. "We've all been making plans based on your new situation. Olivia has been looking at houses in better school districts. Leo has been researching private schools for the kids. You've been making plans. Family plans," she corrected smoothly. "Plans that include everyone being more comfortable and more secure. What if I don't want to make those plans?" The mask slipped, just a fraction. Not enough for most people to notice, but enough for someone who had spent her entire life watching for it. "Ava," Leo's voice carried a distinct warning note. "Don't make any hasty decisions you'll regret later, like giving money to charity instead of to my family, like throwing away an opportunity to really help the people who matter most." There it was. The raw, naked self-interest they had spent weeks trying to disguise as family love and concern. "And what if I'm not convinced that you're the people who matter most?" Mom's expression hardened. "What is that supposed to mean? It means that the people who matter most to me probably wouldn't have uninvited me from Thanksgiving dinner. They probably wouldn't have laughed at my claims of success. They probably wouldn't have spent years treating me like the family failure. Ava, we've apologized for all of that. Number, you've apologized because it became inconvenient for you to have treated me badly, not because you actually regretted it. The room was completely silent now. 4 people who had just spent 40 minutes explaining why they deserved my money, more than starving children or homeless veterans or medical researchers. "We're your family," Mom said finally, her voice tight with anger. "That has to count for something. It does count for something, Mom. It counts for exactly as much as it counted 3 weeks ago when you decided I was too much of a disappointment to sit at your table." "This is ridiculous." Leo stood up. "Ava, you're being emotional and vindictive." "Am I? Or am I just being exactly as practical as all of you? What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm making my plans based on how people actually treat me, not on how they say they feel about me." Olivia was starting to look panicked. "Ava, please don't do anything drastic. We can work through this." "Work through what, exactly?" "This anger you're feeling, these trust issues." "My trust issues? You're clearly still hurt about Thanksgiving, and I get that. But destroying your family relationships over one misunderstanding is not the answer. One misunderstanding. The casual dismissal of 33 years of subtle diminishment as a single misunderstanding was almost impressive in its audacity. "Ava," Dad said in his most reasonable tone, "why don't we all take a break from this conversation? Give everyone some time to cool down. I'm perfectly cool, Dad. In fact, I've never been more clear-headed in my entire life." "What does that mean?" "It means I've made my decision." The words landed like stones in a still pond, sending ripples of anxiety across their faces. "What decision?" Mom's voice was a mere whisper. "The decision about what to do with the money." "And?" I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. "And you'll all find out soon enough." I waited until the following Friday to make my final move. Not because I needed time to decide. That decision had been made the moment they started making plans for my money, but because I wanted them to spend a full week stewing in their own greed and uncertainty. The suspense was clearly eating them alive. My phone rang constantly with carefully casual check-ins and not so subtle advice. Finally, on Friday afternoon, I sent one last group text. "Family meeting. Sunday at 2 p.m. Final announcement. Please be on time." They arrived early, clustering in my living room with a nervous energy that was almost palpable. Mom had brought another batch of cookies, another transparent attempt to remind me of our shared history and her supposed love. "Well," Dad said as soon as they were all seated, "we're all here." I stood before them, looking at the 4 faces I had known my entire life, but was only now seeing with perfect clarity. "I want to thank you all for coming. I know the past few weeks have been a lot." "Ava," Olivia began, but I held up a hand. "I've made some decisions, and I wanted you to hear them from me directly." The tension in the room was thick enough to taste. 4 people trying to look supportive while mentally calculating how much money was about to change their lives. "First," I began, "I've decided what to do with the lottery winnings." A collective held breath. "I'm giving it all away." The silence was deafening. "All of it?" Leo's voice cracked. "Well, not quite all of it. I'm keeping enough to maintain my current lifestyle and ensure I'm secure in my retirement. But the rest, approximately $75 million, is going to charity." Mom's face had gone completely white. "Ava, that's a very big decision." "It is. Maybe you should think about it a little longer." "I've thought about it a great deal. In fact, I've set up a foundation. It will be focused on supporting young people who have been dismissed or underestimated by their own families. People who need someone to believe in their potential when the people closest to them refuse to. The symbolism was a direct hit. No one missed it. "Ava," Dad said carefully, "what about your family? What about the people who have always supported you? What about them? Don't we... I mean, after everything we've been through together. After everything we've been through together, I think this is exactly the right decision." Olivia was starting to tear up. Ava, please. I know we made mistakes, but we're your family. That has to count for something. It does count for something, Olivia. It counts for exactly what it's always counted for. Which is what? Which is whatever you decide it's worth when you think I have nothing to give you. The words hung in the air like an indictment. Ava, Mom's voice was pleading now. We've apologized. We've admitted we were wrong about you. What more do you want from us? I don't want anything from you, Mom. That's the entire point. But we're your family. You're my biological relatives. There's a difference. That's not true. We love you. Number. You love what you thought I could do for you. There's a difference there, too. Leo stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous, Ava. You're just punishing us for one mistake. One mistake? The Thanksgiving thing. The misunderstanding about your finances. We said we were sorry. The misunderstanding about my finances happened because you never bothered to actually know me. The Thanksgiving uninvitation happened because you were embarrassed by what you thought I was. You weren't trying to help me. You were trying to manage a problem you thought I represented. And when that problem suddenly turned into a financial opportunity, you just pivoted to managing that instead. That's not fair, isn't it? 3 weeks ago, I was too much of a failure to sit at your dinner table. Today, you're all making detailed plans for how to spend my money. If that's not managing me like a resource instead of loving me like a person, then what would you call it? None of them had an answer for that. Ava, Olivia tried one last time, her voice thick with tears. Families forgive each other. That's what makes us family. You're absolutely right, Olivia, I said, and a flicker of hope crossed their faces. Families do forgive each other, but first they have to apologize for the right things. And you're not apologizing for 33 years of treating me like I wasn't good enough. You're apologizing because you're inconvenienced by the fact that you were wrong about my bank balance. The hope died. I've also made another decision. I continued into the heavy silence. I'm moving. Moving where? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. Somewhere else. Somewhere I can build a life with people who see my worth without needing a bank statement to convince them. Ava, please. This house is being sold. The proceeds will go to the foundation, along with my car, most of this furniture, and anything else that might remind you of the opportunity you missed. They sat in stunned silence, watching their imagined financial security evaporate in real time. You can't be serious, Leo finally said. I have never been more serious about anything in my life. Ava, Mom stood up, her voice taking on the authoritative tone she'd used on me as a child. You are making a terrible, terrible mistake. Family is forever. Money comes and goes, but family is a choice, Mom, not an obligation. And I am choosing to invest my time, my energy, and my resources in people who chose to value me long before they knew what I was worth. I looked around the room at these people who shared my DNA, but had never truly known me, had never even tried, had never believed I was worth knowing in the first place. I want you all to leave now. Ava, please leave my house. They gathered their things in a shocked, silent daze, moving like people in a dream who hadn't yet realized it was actually a nightmare. At the door, Mom turned back one last time. You will regret this, Ava, when you're all alone and you realize what you've thrown away, what you've lost. I haven't lost anything, Mom, I said softly. I've just finally figured out what I never actually had. She flinched as if I'd struck her, but this time, she didn't argue. After they were gone, I sat alone in my beautiful living room, surrounded by expensive things that had never made me feel as wealthy as I did in that one moment. Because real wealth, I was finally learning, wasn't about money at all. It was about knowing your own worth and refusing to accept anything less than you deserved from anyone, even and especially from the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally. For the first time in my life, I felt truly rich. 6 months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop in Denver, Colorado, reading an email from the director of my foundation. We just approved funding for a new scholarship program aimed at young adults who had been estranged from their families, kids aging out of foster care, LGBTQ plus youth rejected by their parents, children of addicts who had chosen recovery over a toxic home environment. The Phoenix Foundation for Second Chances had already funded 12 scholarships in its first quarter alone. 12 young people who would now get to go to college despite having no family support, no safety net, and no one to believe in their potential. It was the best money I had ever spent. My phone buzzed with a text message, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Maya, who had moved to Denver with me after deciding she was tired of East Coast winters. Lunch at 1? I have news. I smiled, packing up my laptop. News from Maya was usually worth hearing. We met at our favorite spot, a small bistro near the nonprofit office where I volunteered 3 days a week. Maya was already there, practically vibrating with excitement. Okay, spill it, I said, sliding into the chair across from her. I ran into Ethan Reed at the grocery store yesterday. Ethan Reed. The name took a second to register. Then I remembered Leo's college roommate, a guy I'd had a mild crush on for about 10 minutes when I was 19. And he's divorced, just moved to Denver last month for a job. And he asked about you, asked what about me, where you were, what you were doing, if you were happy. I raised an eyebrow. Why would Ethan Reed care if I'm happy? Because apparently he's had a thing for you since college. But he said you were always so focused on what your family thought about everything that he figured you weren't interested in dating someone outside of their approved circle. That's ridiculous. Is it? Ava, you spent years trying to be the daughter your parents wanted you to be instead of the person you actually were. Ethan saw that. He said he always admired how hard you tried to make them proud, but he could tell it was costing you pieces of yourself. The observation was uncomfortably accurate. What did you tell him? I told him you had finally figured out who you were without their input and that you were happier than I'd ever seen you. And he asked if it would be okay to get your number. I considered it. Dating hadn't really been on my radar since the move. I'd been too busy figuring out how to live authentically, how to build friendships based on mutual respect instead of obligation. But maybe it was time to see what it felt like to be valued by someone who had no agenda beyond just enjoying my company. Give him my number. Maya grinned. Already did. Of course she did. My phone rang as if on cue. An unknown Denver number. That might be him now, Maya said with a completely innocent expression. I answered, and Ethan's voice was exactly as I remembered it. Warm, a little nervous, and genuinely pleased to hear from me. Ava? It's Ethan Reed. I hope it's okay that Maya gave me your number. It's fine. She mentioned you'd moved to Denver. Yeah. New job, fresh start. The whole mid-30s cliché. He laughed, and the sound was surprisingly comfortable. Maya said you'd moved out here, too. I did. I needed some distance from my old life for a while. I can understand that. Listen, I know this is out of the blue, but I was wondering if you might be interested in having dinner sometime? I'd like that, I said, surprised by how easy it was. No calculations about what he might want from me, no careful management of his expectations. Just two adults talking about the possibility of getting to know each other. Tell me something, Ethan. What made you want to ask me out now, after all these years? Honestly? Maya told me you'd finally stopped trying to be who other people wanted you to be and had just started being who you actually are. That's the person I was always interested in getting to know. It was a good answer, a perfect answer maybe. 3 days later, I was getting ready for what felt like my first real date in years. Not a date with someone my family approved of, not a date designed to check boxes on someone else's list, but a date with someone who was interested in me as I actually was. I met Ethan at a quiet restaurant downtown. He looked older, more settled, but his smile was exactly the same. He paused, searching for the right word. You look like yourself, if that makes any sense. It made perfect sense. Over dinner, we talked about everything except my family, my work with the foundation, his new job in sustainable architecture, our shared love for hiking in the Rockies. It was just a normal conversation between two people enjoying each other's company. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said over dessert. "Maya mentioned you'd had some kind of falling out with your family. I don't need the details, but I just want you to know, I never understood how they treated you. What do you mean? Even back in college, when Leo would complain about his dramatic sister, or your parents would make little comments about your choices, I always thought they were missing something important about who you were. Which was what? That you were the most genuine person in that entire family. The only one who seemed to care more about being a good person than about looking successful." I just stared at him from across the table. This man, who had seen something in me that my own family had missed for 3 decades. "Ethan? Yeah? I'm really glad Maya ran into you at the grocery store." He smiled, reaching across the table and taking my hand. "So am I." 6 months after that first date, Ethan proposed during a weekend trip to the mountains. Not because I had money, he was genuinely shocked when I eventually told him about the lottery, but because, as he said, I was the person he wanted to build a real life with. "Even if you were broke?" I had asked, half joking. "Especially if you were broke," he'd replied. "Money is just money, Ava. You're irreplaceable." We were married in a small ceremony, surrounded by friends we had chosen, not relatives we had inherited. Maya was my maid of honor. The director of my foundation officiated. My family wasn't there. Not because I was still angry, but because the anger had long since faded into a peaceful indifference. They had shown me who they were when they thought I had nothing, and I had simply believed them. But this story isn't really about them. It's about learning that your worth is never determined by other people's ability to see it. It's about choosing to invest your time, your energy, and your love in people who value you for who you are, not for what you can do for them. It's about understanding that sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to walk away from people who diminish you, especially when those people share your last name. That lottery ticket changed my bank balance, but learning to value myself, that changed my entire life. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about finding your worth and building the life you truly want. Remember, you don't need to win the lottery to realize you deserve better than people who only see your value when it benefits them. And if you've ever had to choose between family approval and your own self-respect, please know that you are not alone. Sometimes the family we choose is far more loving than the family we're given. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps you write your own. End of story.